Today we're going to talk about masculine and feminine energies in relationships. And this is a topic that I honestly could talk about for about 20 hours straight. And we could talk about how the masculine and feminine integrates within each of us to become whole. We can talk about how it integrates into business and education and performance and lovemaking and child rearing and everything. Like, this is a topic that is very, very close to my heart because I think it's something that is so misunderstood. It's misunderstood to the point that it actually causes us not to be able to connect with each other. And I think as humans, connection is how we love. It's how we're nourished. We're meant to feel a part of. We're meant to feel union. We're meant to feel part of a group. We're meant to feel like we belong here. And this strange experience of the masculine and feminine in all aspects of our life, because it's kind of been bastardized, misunderstood, because we've lived in separation as opposed to union, even there it's misunderstood. So today I'm going to try to focus on how it applies to relationships. But it'll likely tangent off into a few places because it's just so, well, it's all the same. And so today I'm going to try to focus on relationships. And in terms of relationships, it's important to know that this has nothing to do with gender expression. It has nothing to do with orientation. It has nothing to do with any of that. There are times when gender seems to matter, but most of the time it doesn't. It's not relevant at all. It's kind of where we've gotten confused. So imagine a world that is built in separation, that for some reason we become combative with each other. Everything's a power struggle. So even within us, the masculine and feminine is separate. We separate logic and intuition. We separate all these things, that they're kind of these warring factors, as opposed to something that actually works together and builds on each other and plays together and goes, oh, that's interesting. I like that other aspect of this. We actually get to play with it as opposed to these separate entities, right? So now imagine, and again, I'm sure we could philosophize for a long time as to why there's separation in the world right now, or why there has been for millennia. But so because we have this separation, and then we have a patriarchy, and this isn't me dissing the patriarchy, it's just reality. We've had this weird power struggle, which and I'm going to put masculine in air quotes, because what the masculine I'm saying in this separate patriarchal perspective, and again, I'm not even talking about male, female, because this is authority over whoever's under, it's teacher, student, it's all these things. It's literally the dysfunctional masculine, feminine in separation. This is where we've misunderstood what the masculine, feminine is. And we've thought, oh, masculine means angry and feminine means subdued, and masculine means assertive and feminine means passive, and masculine means I do CrossFit and feminine means I do yoga or something. Like we don't understand that they're designed to work together, and their energies. It isn't a case of us all just doing different things or having different interests. It's actually energies in the world that work together. Okay, so here's me tangenting off of the relationship thing. As an example, Einstein when he died, so in the brain, again, a topic I could talk about for about an hour. In the brain, when we're born, our mind is all just gray matter, just neurons, almost like bare wires, right? And then as we start to learn, as we start to listen and understand hearing and talking, this part of the brain starts to myelinate, where a white sheath comes over that gray matter and becomes white matter. And now all of this part of the brain is now white matter. And as we start to move and we start to understand that, this part of the brain starts to myelinate. And this is growth. Well, what's really interesting, say about, like I said, I could talk about myelination all day. It's very interesting. But so Einstein's brain, we understand this sort of left brain, right brain, where the left brain is logic, structure, mathematics, science. And the right brain is art and the big picture and flow and expansiveness and mystery, right? Well, between the left and the right brain is this corpus callosum, right? It's the connection between them. When Einstein died, his brain, they kept on... in my mind, I have on file, which is not right, and now it's blocking the proper words. But they kept his brain, and they looked at it, and they wanted to analyze it. And at that time, what they found was his corpus callosum was the most heavily myelinated brain they'd ever seen. And what this meant was that his mystery, art, perception of the universe, that expansive self that he was, beautifully danced with the logical side of him. They worked together. They played together. They were incredibly different. Logic is not an aspect of opening to mystery. They're not the same at all. They're not on a continuum. They're opposite aspects of the yin-yang symbol that brings us together to really understand the world, right? So he could use his structure, and from that structure, he could release it and expand into the universe and then bring that back and say, is there structure? Well, that's interesting. And then that could send him off in another place. And a dance begins between the left and the right brain. This is the goal of the masculine and feminine in our lives, in relationships, is that it isn't about making each other the same. It isn't a power struggle at all. That both aspects are equally strong, equally loving, equally wonderful, equally empathic, equally surrendered, so that we can join together and experience something brand new. One of the reasons, so there's a few things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why this is a topic I love to teach. And we're going to talk about what the masculine and feminine really is as a redefinition. And then we'll talk about the different dynamics, about how they actually play in relationship. In total, I think I normally teach about 12 different masculine and feminine dynamics that have nothing to do with relationship, that are more about inner structure. I probably will do a talk about that another day. So one of the big reasons I talk about this in relationships is because in relationships we so often feel that something's missing. The fire goes out. The relationship becomes stagnant. And we don't know what happened. We don't know, everybody's trying, everybody's showing up in whatever way they believe they're supposed to. And yet the passion dies. We even normalize this by saying, oh, well, sometimes the honeymoon period just ends. Oh, well, right? And it's like, what if that's not true? Why should the honeymoon period end? Out of 7.5 billion people on the planet, you chose this one person to be intimate with, to be, assuming a monogamous, nothing against polyamory or anything, but let's just, in this example, we chose this one person to actually do this with. why would we ever let the fire go out? Why would we do that? We can have platonic relationships with anybody, you know? And so something inside, it hits us. We all have fears, right? We all have fears like, is it me? Did I do something wrong? You know, am I not good enough? Am I not attractive? Are they not interested in me anymore? What happened? And it kind of, and then of course, if we say something like that, the other person goes, no, what are you talking about? Because we just don't have the structure to understand why the fire went out. We just don't understand. So this is a big thing. And sometimes also what happens beyond even just the fire going out, there can be real bitterness. Because for many people, there is a desire to polarize to the masculine or feminine. And this isn't everyone. Many people love just simply having that beautiful masculine feminine balance within. They are completely individuated people, and they have no desire to actually bring that into a relationship and create this dynamic masculine feminine dance. There's no desire for that. And even in a partnership, maybe all they want is just a wonderful companion that they can fool around and have some sex and go on holidays together and just enjoy each other's company like soul friends. That's wonderful. That is a beautiful thing. But others, that they want more than that. They want the dynamic. They want the dance. They want to feel passion. They want their heart to pound when their partner walks in the door. That's what they want, and they want it for the whole relationship. So that's what we're talking about today. The other thing that's really one of the real positive things that I love talking about and why I love talking about it is because when we've ever experienced this polarity that I'm talking about, it is so exciting. It is like a part of you gets to live that you kind of only dreamt was possible. Because this is one of the challenges in talking about this, finding polarity, finding the masculine and feminine balance in relationships, is depending on the families we were raised in or the society we were raised in, we don't even want to polarize. We don't want to go into either the masculine or feminine. It either feels unsafe, or this must mean that I'm overpowering the other person, or what if I do the wrong thing, or we have all these fears around it. And on the other side, maybe we're not 100% sure we even believe that there's anyone out there who wants to polarize with us. You know, if you've always sort of had to be in charge, you think, oh, maybe there's no one else that, let's say, for example, there's a lot of people who actually might really want to be able to rest in the feminine. And when I say rest, I don't mean do nothing. I mean release and surrender into the feminine. But in all their relationships, they've always had people who also seemed to be in the feminine or didn't want to step into the masculine for some reason. And deep down, it's kind of like, do these people really exist? Am I ever going to find someone who really wants that? So sometimes we have that in the back of our minds thinking, forget it. Forget about polarity. We'll just hang out. We'll just, do other things together because I don't think it's worth the hassle or whatever. So again, I'm not saying that's true. I don't think it's true. And I think as we all heal our own inner masculine and feminine, and we even understand what it is to experience this in union. Because again, the world we're living in right now, separation is the norm. It's the norm in business, it's the norm in everything. And even in our most intimate relationships, separation is actually the norm. So, in terms of the masculine and feminine, I want you to imagine for yourself that if you were to go into a relationship, which polarity would you prefer? And again, nothing's black and white. Nothing's 100%. normally people live on sort of a continuum where you might say, well, I might like, so me, for example, because let's talk about me. I would probably prefer to be like 80% in the feminine and 20% in the masculine, right? And again, we'll talk more about what I mean by masculine and feminine in a minute. But, you know, it's not that I'm always going to be in the feminine in a relationship. But my ideal, if I was to find my ideal partner, if I want to be in the feminine 80% and the masculine 20, it'd be great if they were the opposite. They were 20-80 or 80 masculine, 20 feminine. If they also want to be in the feminine and I want to be in the feminine, we're going to have trouble, right? And this happens a lot. This happens a lot in heterosexual relationships, homosexual, everything. It happens in all orientations and genders. Where I remember talking to one friend who took a course with me about this, and he is a gay man and a bottom, and he prefers the feminine. Generally, again, it's a continuum, right? We all have a continuum. But once he had sort of learned about this, he said, wow, my relationships are making so much sense. Because every time I was in a relationship with someone and we were both actually bottoms, one of us had to shift. One of us had to go into the masculine in order for it to work, right? And of course, it's way more obvious in a gay male relationship, right? That, oh, okay, we've got to shift, right? And he said those relationships always had so much strife in them. And he said it was almost like I didn't understand why there was such a power struggle. But deep down, we were being forced into a polarity. One of us had to be forced into polarity we didn't want, and that person was becoming resentful and eventually dissatisfied because they weren't able to express and expand into the aspect that they really wanted to. And this happens all the time, right? For example, in heterosexual relationships, very often, and I'm going to say this, and this may get me into trouble, but I've never worked with a couple yet where it was actually strengthening for the woman to be in the masculine and the man to be in the feminine. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I've never seen it. You know, I used to teach ballroom dance. I once owned a dance studio in another lifetime, like in 2006. And I used to teach ballroom and Latin dance. So you always had the leaders and the followers. What was fascinating is in all the years I taught, never once did I say, oh no, but you guys should switch leader and follower. Very often, the dynamic that happened when people came to dance class is the women had been taking other classes with me, and they had dragged their husbands here. Because realize, where I was teaching is, again, a very small town. When I moved to Toronto and I actually went for dance classes where men love to dance, it was very different. A lot of men from Spanish countries and stuff who were such wonderful dancers. But when you live in a rural community, the men tend to get dragged for dance class. So what you saw in the relationships in these dances, because you often saw the relationships in the dance, right, is the women were the ones that dragged the men there. And the men went, oh, okay, right? So what's that dynamic, right? The woman is in the masculine, the man's in the feminine, and, you know, whatever. But what's interesting to me is in the process of learning to dance, the men had to learn to lead and the women had to learn to follow. And it was almost like taking their whole relationship and upending it. Because the whole time, the women would be telling the men, no, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. No, don't. You know? And the men were just sort of going back and back, which is why in dance classes, you always change partners. Because we have to shift out of the dynamics that people are having at home so that the women can actually learn to actually follow and the men can learn to lead. And so what's really interesting about that, so when I first opened my dance studio, I also dragged my husband to dance classes. And we had all these same power struggles when we were learning how to dance. And of course, he had sort of learned that, oh, if Katrina gets something in her head, he better just back off and just do it. Right? And of course, we had to shift this dynamic because I had to learn to be quiet and actually learn to follow. And then he had to learn to be able to lead, and I had to trust him. And then he had to know that I was trusting him. And there was this whole, it's a very deep dynamic, this masculine and feminine dance. Well, the cool thing is the reason I opened the dance studio was because this man had moved to town who was an amazing dancer. And his classes were just growing and growing and growing and growing. And I went up to him one day and I said, hey, you should open a dance studio here. I was just a student. I was very shy. I'd never taught anything in my life. I was literally just, I don't even want to be in front of a group. But so I said to him, I said, if you wanted to, I'll be the business end. You let me do everything else and you just be the star. You just be the dancer. And I will just create. I was going to be that structure. I was going to be that masculine structure kind of thing. And he could just dance and he could just teach and just bring everybody in. And so anyway, he was an amazing dancer and strong lead. Like he'd been dancing for 30 years, right? He'd been teaching. And so when I had to dance with him, because sometimes we would go out and perform in public and things, I was constantly trying to backlead him because I was so accustomed to backleading my husband. See why I have to teach masculine and feminine dynamics? And so here's me with him, and he'd just look at me and go, why are you fighting me? And I'd be like, what? I'm not fighting you. He goes, relax, let me lead. And there was this whole thing inside of me that I had to give up, this thing that I had to be in control all the time. And then I looked at this man and I thought, wait a minute, do I trust his lead? Yeah, he's a brilliant dancer. Right? And so I relaxed and I had to train myself to actually follow his lead. I had to train myself to surrender and actually pick up on his cues and listen and all that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, so what would happen is we would be like doing this bolero, like a dance, and we'd be dancing, and all of a sudden my body would go into this absolute bliss state. Like absolute bliss state. And as soon as I kind of fell into that full surrender, we would like float over the floor because we had merged, right? When you watch dancers come to a place where they actually merge, like the masculine and feminine, the masculine is in full leading and the feminine is in full merging, something happens. And now you're watching one couple. You're watching one new creation floating around the dance floor. And it is a completely different thing to see. And it actually takes you into a bliss state to watch it. It's just magical. You can feel it. And he used to have to kind of snap me out of it because I would just be in this absolutely eyes rolling back bliss state. And of course, the more I did that, the more he would lead me, and this was this dynamic dance. And the wilder he sort of got leading me, the more I would have to surrender. So the energy just got bigger and bigger and bigger till the entire room was like, like this, watching us. And I learned a lot right there about not only the bliss of surrender in the feminine, but the real responsibility and power of a strong lead, right? Because the important thing to understand about, let's take the leading and let's dive into leading and following for a minute. It seems to be where the universe has taken us this morning or this evening, wherever we are in the world. So one of the huge dynamics about the masculine and feminine that we have to understand is that in all dynamics, the masculine reads the feminine to know what to do. So it's almost like say in the dynamic of giving and receiving, we are going to get back to the dance. I have a little note in my head. In giving and receiving, the receiver is an empty cup, and the giver has something to put in the cup, right? So if I'm hungry, if I show up at your house and you say, hey, are you hungry? And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of hungry. I'm in the feminine, and you say, hey, do you want a sandwich? I'm like, oh, I love a sandwich. This is the masculine and feminine. Every single interaction we have with each other in duality it has a masculine and feminine component if we're interacting, right? It's that whole singularity of the oneness, which is God, divinity. But here on this earth, we are in duality. So in order to interact with each other, every single interaction is masculine and feminine, not gender. I have no other better words for it. Even yin and yang is okay, but it doesn't quite have the dynamic something that masculine and feminine has. So this is a masculine feminine dynamic. But what if I come in as the feminine and I say, I'm really hungry, and this person says, oh, well, I have this, but the feminine goes, oh, I can't eat that today. And the other person says, yeah, but you should eat it anyway. I'm giving it to you. And you're like, but I don't really want it. But this is giving and receiving in separation, right? Imagine like giving and receiving, talking and listening, right? This is one of the number one ways we interact in a masculine feminine way. The listener is listening. The masculine is speaking. If the speaker is actually saying something that the listener wants to hear, union happens, right? But if I'm just speaking for the sake of hearing myself talk, and I'm forcing you to listen because you've been well trained to just pretend you're listening, this is a conversation in separation where nothing's really happening, right? So this is what I mean. These masculine and feminine dynamics, they're happening all the time. The question really becomes, are we in union or are we in separation? So this reading of the feminine is so important, right? And again, I recognize it all sounds very gender-based, and I don't mean it to be. But if we want to interact with someone, if we want to help someone, one of the dynamics we'll talk about, I think, is the protector and the vulnerable, right? If someone's hurting, it isn't about imposing something on them to help them. It's about reading them, being empathically connected, and saying, what do you need? I want to help. The masculine reads the feminine, and the feminine says, I just really need a shoulder to cry on. Or I just want to vent for a while. Or I just need to jump up and down and scream. Or I just want a cup of coffee. Or a friend. And the masculine says, done. I'm here for you. But it's always about reading the feminine. And most of our interactions, again, have nothing to do with gender and have nothing to do with that continuum I asked you to consider in relationships. See how hard it is for me to stay on the relationship thing? So for an example, and we'll go back to the leading and following. A good leader, a good masculine leader, and again, this doesn't have to be gender. I taught dance for a long time, so I'm a brilliant leader, right? I prefer to follow, but I can certainly lead if I want to. If I want to dance, and there's just not enough leaders out there. A good leader. I want you to imagine this. Let's imagine this scene. We're at a wedding, right? And there's this man there who's, I'm going to say it's a man, because I'm just going to. And he's an amazing dancer, amazing leader, amazing, just been doing it for 20 years. And he sees this woman across the room, and she has like a cha-cha dress on. Like, she obviously is a dancer. And he goes, ooh, interesting. So he goes across and he said, would you like to dance? This is a great cha-cha. And she says, why, yes. So what happens? She doesn't really know him, right? So she's kind of like, okay, let's see what he can do. Let's see what he's up about, right? A good leader will watch her and follow her. He'll try something. Does she understand? Oh, she gets it. And he'll try a bit more. And he'll try a bit more. And then what happens? She says, he's actually watching me. He's noticing me. He's considering what's happening. This is interesting. I'll surrender a bit more to his lead. And he feels, ooh, she just surrendered to my lead. Okay, why don't I try this? Why don't I try that? And she goes, whoa, this is really fun. Okay, you know what? I'm going to fully surrender. And the merging happens. And they have this incredible dance in union. At the end of the dance, he says, thank you so much. This was fantastic. He goes and sits down, and some lovely slow waltz comes on. And he looks across the room, and he sees his granny. And he says, I know this is her favorite song. So he walks over to Granny, and he says, do you want to dance? And she says, oh, yes, right? And of course, maybe she's only this tall, and he's this tall, right? So what does he do? He reads her, right? He doesn't swing her around the floor like that other woman. He reads her, and he kind of holds her in a certain way, and he moves nice and slowly, and he shortens his step, and he does this thing, and he moves her, and he goes, oh, Granny's doing okay. And then he tries this. Oh, that kind of made her stop. Okay, let's slow back down, and let's totally go with her speed, right? He will be in total union with her. Whether he dances this wild cha-cha with someone, or he dances in beautiful union with his granny, the union is the same. The bliss state is the same. And for everybody sitting and watching, it is exactly the same blissful experience to watch, because we're watching union. And it doesn't matter what happens within the union. All that matters is that that's what happens. So now imagine we come into relationships. For many people, let's say you are someone who would prefer to be in the masculine. But maybe you're afraid to be in the masculine, right? Maybe you had an overbearing parents, or you just live in a society where, the masculine means aggression and anger and meanness, and, you had difficult experiences. So you sort of hold back, right? The whole point of learning this is that stepping into the polarity, stepping into the masculine, strengthens us from the inside. That's the point. The point isn't, I don't care whether someone prefers the masculine or the feminine or neither. It makes no difference. All that matters for each one of us on our spiritual path, on our journey here on the planet, is what allows growth for us, what strengthens us, what expands us. And if in our deepest heart, what we truly desire is to be able to expand and explore the feminine, or expand and explore the masculine, that's all we need to know. And we can even say that in our relationship and say, I heard this, weird chick talking on Insight Timer, and she was talking about the masculine and feminine, and I kind of really want to step into the masculine, but I don't really quite know what that means, and I'm not really sure I even know how to read you, but I'd like to really try. I'd like to try to figure this out. And the chances are that you've chosen someone who also might really love to step into the feminine. But maybe they grew up in a situation where, no, you have to be strong. You can't let your guard down. If you're not going to do it, if you don't get it done, no one else is going to do it. So you better just get it done, right? And what if they say, well, okay, yeah, I'd actually love to try this out. I'd love to receive. I'd love to surrender and learn to follow, or whatever, right? To allow us to be very light about it and just say, I'd love to try this out. So I want to talk about a few of the big dynamics that happen in relationships. We're back to relationships. We've talked a bit about giving and receiving. And giving and receiving, again, there's a continuum. And your continuum may be different on all these different dynamics, right? But giving and receiving is a very interesting one in relationship. And it's kind of that bringing home flowers, and just saying, wow, I was thinking about you and I've brought you flowers. And that the other part of the masculine feminine dynamic is it's not about being even Steven. There's a great book called Give and Take. Give and Take. And it's all about how the world is filled with givers and takers. And giving and receiving is very different than giving and taking. Giving and taking are both masculine. Taking is taking, and giving is giving. They're both masculine. Giving and receiving is very different. And it's a brilliant book if giving and receiving is a challenge for you, because, well, here's the premise of it. And basically that there are a lot of people in the world who are takers. And they will take and take and take and take to the point, and they, of course, givers they're attracted to givers. And then what happens is the givers soon learn that there's no joy in this giving. There's no appreciation. There's no actually being received. It's just taking. And eventually the givers stop giving and they become matchers. And the giver only gives to the same amount that the taker gives, which becomes nothing. So nothing happens. Eventually the whole thing dies, right? But we've created a world of matchers. That if I give you this, I have to give you this. And because we only understand the masculine, we only understand the giving. Giving is the only part that is altruistic and interesting and, takes effort or whatever. But it's a really big deal to receive. It's a really big deal for someone to give you a gift and you actually say, thank you. I really appreciate that. That just made my day. At the end of that interaction, it is complete. No one owes anything to anyone. The giving and the receiving completed each other. That's the only reason we ever want to give. Because again, we have issues with giving. We sometimes give with strings attached. That, oh, okay, well, I've done this, and now they'll do this for me, and we keep track. Separation. This has nothing to do with union. So we want to only give when the only desire is that the other person receives it. That's it. And obviously we give something that we know they would like to receive. Right? There's something, it's like when someone gives you a compliment. The best thing we can do is receive it. Right? Like, imagine someone comes up to you and says, wow, you're such a great person. And I go, yeah, you're a great person too. You just zeroed out the whole experience. That compliment meant nothing. Right? They genuinely were giving you something. They were giving you a compliment. They said, you're a really great person. And we're allowed to say, wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's the end. In true union, that's the end. Again, if they said it to fish for a compliment. Oh, you're actually a really great driver or something. There's no strings attached. We're just, see what I mean? Like, I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. We could just talk about giving and receiving for about 2 hours. But I'm going to get on because we've only got 15 minutes left. Okay. Nope, I have to talk about giving and receiving. Imagine this then sexually, because we're talking about relationships. If we do the even Steven thing, it's like the energy just goes back and forth and you're sort of in separation, right? Okay, I'll do this to you and then you do this to me and then I'll do this to you and then you do this to me. But you're kind of just, you're just in separation. It's like this and then this and then this. But instead, if you say, okay, I'm going to be in the giving and you're going to be in the receiving. There is something about the masculine partner being totally received. Every ounce of them. As the feminine saying, and again, this is all within union. This isn't in separation. Everything I'm talking about assumes union. It assumes trust. It assumes love. Right? You can imagine how all this works in separation. Right? Everything I'm talking about assumes union. I remember even when I first discovered this in intimacy, and I realized that because, previously, because sexual relationships were kind of just sort of that pounding sex, right? Where you're sort of, the feminine almost has to defend herself a little. It's different, right? You sort of have these two masculines banging together because the feminine has to be tight, just sort of preparing for all of this pounding. Whereas if you actually have intimacy and union, right? The masculine is just the energy moving in, and the feminine simply receives that energy, and it's completely different. And I realized that there was some part of me, energetically, mentally, emotionally, physically, that was kind of pushing back on my husband, on my partner. I was like pushing back. And I realized that he would feel that pushback. He would feel that I accept you, but not all of you. I don't trust you completely. I don't know what you're going to do, right? So there's this sort of, I'm open, but I'm not totally open. And I felt something in me say, what if you were totally open? Like, what if you actually totally received him for all he was, mind, body, and spirit? What would that feel like? And so that's what I did. I just sort of opened into this complete feminine, like that full polarization. And it was like he felt it, and his whole energy went, like just all in. And you can imagine this experience, right? You can imagine suddenly the masculine partner just is all in going, and the feminine partner is all in receiving. And now you've got a dynamic flow, right? Because there's no guards up. There's no energy blocks. There's nothing. It's a full receiving, full giving. And of course, you can imagine in this circle, right? This full giving, receiving, very soon, who's giving and receiving disappears. It just becomes a whole. And this is where it doesn't matter who's giving. It doesn't matter who's receiving. But there will be generally one partner who, when they kick into gear in either full receiving or full giving, they will be so strong and all the energy will flow right. And inside of them, they will be strengthened and empowered, and they will feel like who they really are. But it's almost just like, we just have to be aware. And again, sometimes we can play in the opposite, but there will be one way that it's like, this is very easy. So one of my favorite dynamics in the masculine and feminine relationships is structure and chaos. And I'm just going to talk about it in intimacy. Because in the rest of our life, we easily shift who is in structure, who is in chaos, who that's not gendered, that's not part of our preference in relationship or anything like that. Structure and chaos can be like, it can be like an artist who simply needs the freedom to explore without having to worry about money, without having to worry about a place or being able to buy canvases, because they just want to be in that pure creative space. So historically, this painter would find a benefactor or someone who would say, you know what, I really want to see what you're going to create. I want to see what part of God you're going to put on that canvas. So I will create a space for you. I will buy your canvases. I will make sure you have food. Go. This is a beautiful merging of structure and chaos, structure and wild. And then something magical is born out of that union, right? In relationships, it's the same. And it's really important to honor that, because oftentimes, if you sort of have that natural sort of, you prefer the feminine spirit in relationships, you prefer that kind of wild, and chaos doesn't mean bad. Chaos means not structured. It means wild. It means the infinite space where all things are born, right? And even sometimes we talk about chaos after destruction, maybe after a tornado or a hurricane. It was just chaos, but from that chaos, something else is born, right? Because the structure was destroyed, or the old ways were destroyed, or something. We even have this for sure in Dark Nights of the Soul. We dive into chaos. We dive into that place, that darkness. But again, because we've sort of demonized the feminine, we've demonized the darkness, we've demonized the chaos, the lack of structure. We don't like it. It's very uncomfortable. We've been told that no, structure is the only way. There's a reason that the maths and the sciences are considered more important than the arts, right? It's no, structure is the answer. It's a patriarchal worldview, and I don't mean that gendered. I mean that the masculine, all we need is structure. We all want to be the leader. We all want to be the giver. We all want to, everything on the masculine side of all of these dynamics are the only things that are worthy. Everything else is unworthy. And so we don't understand the power of chaos. We don't understand that. And many of us have had the wildness sort of tamed out of us, right? That we're not allowed to just sing our own song. We're not allowed to just spontaneously create from our soul unless it makes money, unless it fits into the structure, unless it fits into our relationship. Where is the wildness? So in intimacy, because I like talking about intimacy, in intimacy, oftentimes in Tantra, you see that statue of, it isn't Shiva and Shakti, but I can't remember who they're actually representing, but I'm going to call it Shiva and Shakti just for fun. So the masculine, I apologize, you can't see my arms because I'm on portrait here, but the masculine is sitting tall, like really strong, cross-legged, and his arms are just sort of out to the side like this, but he's so strong, like total power. And the feminine is sitting on his lap in Yab Yum with her legs around him, and her head's sort of tilted off to one side, and her hands are sort of like this off to the side, and she's like, and how I envision it is her eyes are rolling back in ecstasy because of his incredible strength, she is allowed to enter pure chaos. She is allowed to go to the edge of herself. And again, because they're in union, right? Because they're in union, they both experience both, right? So imagine, for example, Sometimes I try to explain things without stories, which is really hard. You always have to be, it's always a dangerous thing to date me, because eventually you may end up in a story sometime. My husband got really used to it when I was teaching in person, and I had these classes, and I'd have these circles of classes, and I owned this train station where I taught out of, and one time we were all sitting around talking about, I think we were talking about Tantra or something, and all of a sudden my husband walked into the room to go and fix something, and the whole room went dead quiet. And he he looks at the group, and they all kind of looked at him, and he looks at them and he says, "You guys talking about me?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, I figured you were." And he just went on. Okay, I can't tell this without a story. So I had this one beautiful boyfriend, and he couldn't quite understand this whole idea of non-ejaculatory sex, right? Like, that's a really weird thing. And it's like the idea of actually merging in intimacy as opposed to the point just being, getting off or whatever. So he asked me one day, and I never wanted him to come, so I would sort of pull back. Like, if I was getting really orgasmic, I would sort of pull back. And he would say to me, "What are you doing? Why are you pulling back?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't want you to come. I don't want this to end. I want us to continue making love." And he said, "Well, how do I not come then?" And I said, "Well, you can do lots of things. You can like contract your Kegels and all that kind of thing." I said, "But it seems to be, in my experience, it's just a decision inside. It's like a switch inside of you that as soon as you decide you're not going to, you just don't. I don't know why it works that way, but it's just almost like a decision." I said, "But I can't find it for you." Anyway, so he came back a few days later, and we're making love, and it's all the same. And all of a sudden, I feel him starting to get really, really excited. And so I pull back, and he goes, "What are you pulling back for?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to make you come." And he says, "I got you. Don't worry about it." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "No, I've got you. Go. Just go to the end of yourself. Be as wild as you want. Just give her." And I was like, "What?" This is this beautiful marriage of structure and chaos, right? To be able to hold space for someone to just go wild, like to just lose it. And in this world where structure is all that matters and safety is all that matters, and having to look okay and not look goofy and make funny sounds and do all these things, that to actually get to be as wild as we possibly want to. And that's just one example. That's just one example in that one instance. It can also be the other way, where my partner might just need to just go wild for a time, right? And I'm able to be that masculine and say, "Giver, I'm here. I'm just like, I'm 100% open, just give her." And he gets to just go wild, right? We so seldom get to go to the end of ourselves. And sorry, I should have brought water. Alas, no water. And the structure in maybe we're supposed to stop talking. The structure and chaos build on each other. The stronger the one is, the more chaotic the other one will be. The more chaotic this person is, the stronger this person will be. And this builds a trust between you that is unbelievable. And that trust creates a magnetism that literally bonds you together in a way that it kind of is never broken. It doesn't matter even whether you continue to be together as partners or whatever. You had experienced this almost soul bonding because I trusted you to go wild. You trusted me. It's an incredible thing, even in giving and receiving, to actually trust the other person to give, to trust the other person to receive. This is the point, right? And there is such a surrender. There's such a surrender on both parts. Because the masculine partner first surrenders to the feminine. And then the feminine, once the feminine knows they've surrendered, then the feminine surrenders. And then the masculine surrenders to their intuition, and the feminine, because again, it's a union. It's all about union. So I want to say one more thing, because there's one point I didn't make. Well, there's 500 points I didn't make, but there's one I really want to make sure I say today. And one of the dynamics that again is lost in our relationships today is the dynamic of pursuit. And I think this is one of the biggest ones that causes the fire to go out. It also lends itself into a very stagnant relationship even in the bedroom. And it leads it to a very, it disconnects us in that trusting, loving place. A friend of mine, she was seeing this guy, and he just pursued her like crazy. Like just, I mean, everything, just compliments and this and that, and planning things and planning evenings and doing this, and do you want to do this, do you want to do that? And then as time went on, eventually he moved in, and they kind of started doing life, and it all disappeared. And I mean disappeared, like gone. No more compliments, no more planning anything, no more planning evenings together, no more even initiating sex unless he was horny, which is different than initiating connection. Like it's very different to go, I'm kind of, that's, you can, don't get me wrong, because that can be super fun too if the other person's like, oh, okay, that's awesome, right? But he stopped completely. And so after like a year of her believing that there was something wrong with her, and she had done something wrong, and obviously this was her, and why was she so triggered, and oh my God, and oh yeah, she's just repeating a pattern from her past relationship, and she just did this huge, it's all about her, and she screwed up, and all this stuff. She finally just said to him, what happened? Why did you stop putting energy into the relationship? What happened? And he said, no reason to run to catch a bus I've already caught. And there are whispers of this in our society. There's whispers of this that flow through our bodies that say, no, pursue while you don't have them. Pursue, because the point is having the relationship, getting married, having that committed relationship. And then once you get them, you get to relax. You can let your hair down. You don't have to try anymore. It's almost like this weird pursuit of comfort actually destroys the passion in the relationship, right? And the weirdest thing about this, like the strangest thing about this whole masculine feminine dynamic, and again, I'm not talking about genders because this works for everybody. If the person who prefers to be in the feminine pursues the person who prefers to be in the masculine, it doesn't work. The person in the masculine runs away. I don't know why this is, but this is a dynamic that for some reason very seldom swaps polarity. Whereas when the person, and the weird thing about that is, this is where the bitterness lies. This is where weird resentment starts to come. Because what happens as soon as there's a stagnancy in the relationship, the person who wants to be in the feminine starts to, well, come on, hey, why don't we, hey, let's do this, let's do this. What are you talking about? There's like, I don't want that, or da 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 da. It doesn't work. I don't know why. That's not the way that it fixes. And all of a sudden, this person's angry and this person's angry, and now we're passive aggressive, and all kinds of things are happening, and it's no good. For some reason, the only way it works is when the masculine partner chooses to pursue the feminine partner. There's no, I just don't know why. It just is the way it is. But what's interesting again is it becomes a question of what do you want to experience in your life? Do we want to experience growth? Do we want to experience excitement? Do we want to experience dynamic relationship? Or do we want to experience comfort? And there's nothing wrong with desiring comfort, like at all. If this lifetime for you is just, you know what, I just want to relax. I don't want to put energy out. I don't want to grow. I don't want to climb mountains. I don't want to do that. I just want to enjoy my life. It's just really important that your partner has the same goal. That's all. Because if one person only just wants to relax, and if that person happens to be the one in the masculine role, the person in the feminine role is just like, because that's not what they want. Again, it's not that there's anything wrong with this. It's just a mismatch, right? And there's a lot of sadness out there. There's a lot of people who are sort of feeling very lonely inside relationships. And what's really interesting is that pursuit, all it means is that we treat the relationship as a live being, right? That the relationship, it's a fire that we want to keep stoking. We want to keep alive. If we want to keep it alive, I'm assuming we want to keep it alive, then there's something so simple about simply pursuing. And the pursuit, it also requires a bit of risk. If, let's say, you're not in a relationship, it requires a bit of risk. But again, there's something empowering about it. There's something empowering. Again, if you're someone who prefers to be in the masculine, it glues something together inside to go, okay, I don't care. I'm willing to take the risk. Okay, I'm going to risk that. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, it worked. Awesome. Let's do it again. Right? And if we're in relationship, it requires very little pursuit, right? It's just, I remember like this one, the same boyfriend, he, when we first got together, I said to him, I said, I'm really only interested in a real masculine feminine dynamic, and because he was sort of upset that I hadn't been pursuing him. When we were sort of chatting, we had met, I don't know, some online dating thing. And he had sort of backed off texting or backed off planning anything. So I didn't do anything. Because my only desire is to be with someone who naturally loves being in the masculine. Like, I don't want someone to be something they're not. I don't want them to do something that makes them uncomfortable just because that's what I want. I want them to do it because they want to do it. That makes us a match. It's not, I don't want people to do things they don't want to do. So if I'm dating someone and a man doesn't pursue me, then he's not interested. He's not interested in having the kind of relationship that I want. Whether he's interested in me or not, I don't know, but he doesn't love pursuing. He doesn't love that energy. So why would I pursue him? So I didn't pursue this guy because he's already showing me that that's not his thing. So awesome. There's someone else out there for him, right? And then when we finally did get back together, and because he was upset that I wasn't doing it, I wasn't pursuing him, I said, why didn't you pursue me? And he said, well, I was afraid of being rejected. And I was like, and that's a huge deal, fear of rejection. It's a big deal. But again, Again, it just asks us a question. What are we really looking for in relationships? What are we looking for ourselves? Are we looking to grow? Are we looking to strengthen? Are we looking to empower ourselves? Are we looking to change? Are we looking to expand? And for me, I've already been in the masculine so much. I really love to explore the feminine. And that's all. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about, for me, really understanding this. It helps in relationship to not take things personally. It helps to not blame other people and say, well, you just need to be like this, and you should be like this, and you should have done this. It takes all that away, because we just get to say, well, we can do it or we don't have to do it. It's not important. We get to do whatever we want. We get to do whatever is joyful and fun. Okay, I'm going to look at the comments for a moment, because we're way over time. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the donation. Donations are wonderful if you don't have to, but if you want to, it's certainly appreciated. The wedding vows till death do you part. I 100% agree, Helen. The till death do you part is I have such opinions about that. I could just talk about that for... Okay, I just want to talk about that for a minute. Katrina, can I be both masculine and feminine at different times in my life and want to be those opposites? I think I'm going to have to do another talk about this and just go back through and answer all of your questions, because they're really good questions and I really want to answer them. Okay, but I'm going to tell you this one thing about till death do you part. Just this one more thing. So when I was married and I realized that it was time for us to separate. It was really hard because he was a really good man, but we actually just wanted different things in life, and I not only struggled with obviously hurting him, but I I really struggled with I really believed until death do you part. I really believed in that. I believed in staying together forever, and I'd found someone who we loved each other. Why would I end this? It was almost like we could make this happy. We could make this okay. So what? It's not everything I want. So what? I can't expand into everything I want to be. It's okay, because till death do you part, right? I believe in that. And I really did a lot of research about it because it really bothered me. I couldn't find a philosophy that I could live according to that made it okay for me to leave, right? Or to end this marriage. And then I really, again, looked back into this strange patriarchy thing that we've lived in. And when you look back in time, especially in this culture, I can't speak to all cultures, but, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, women couldn't work. So in the most genuine way, in the most generous perspective, what we had was a father who had a daughter, and he knew that this daughter could never work, because at that time women had no rights. They weren't persons. They just, they were dependent on whatever man they were with. So the father said, okay, you're a decent guy. Here, I'm going to give you some money to get you guys started, because I need you to care for my daughter for life. Will you promise to take care of her till death do you part? Because she will never be able to support herself. I don't want her on the street. I love her. And it became an agreement between two men that said, I need you to promise to stay with her and keep her safe, because she had no other choice. And that really sat well with me. That helped me understand something inside of me and where this came from. And that today, that agreement isn't necessary, because everyone's independent and women can work and we can go to school and we can do that, and we're people now. And I'm sure there'll come a time when no one can believe we're even having this conversation. But so that requirement isn't there. And we're actually able to have relationships because we choose to be together. It isn't required it's not required. It's a choice. And we get to be completely whole into ourselves and have a beautiful life all on our own. Or if we meet someone, we say, wow, I would really love to explore being with you for a while, for a time, for as long as it is dynamic and growth oriented for both of us. But as soon as our paths actually do this, or it becomes unhealthy, and I don't mean jumping ship every time your old patterns jump up. I don't mean not doing the work and all that. But I mean, if you genuinely, your time is finished, to be able to honor that and say, wow, thank you so much. This was amazing time together. And I was really thankful at the end of my marriage. We had 6 kids at that time living with us because 4 of my kids' friends had moved in over time. So we had 6 teenagers living in our house, and I didn't know what to do with everybody. And but in a year, they would all be going off to university or college or moving out or whatever. And so we actually stayed together for a whole year while we were separated. And part of my goal in that year was also to really celebrate our marriage. Because for all the reasons I might have wanted to leave, or all the difficult times that happen in all marriages, it's not unique. When 2 sovereign beings live together and we haven't been taught how to actually do this and be sovereign and all that, we're going to have a few issues, right? But I really wanted to celebrate all the good times and all the wonderful things we went through and beautiful things we did for 20 years. And I think as soon as a relationship has choice, that I can leave or stay or whatever, everything changes. All this dynamic energy I'm talking about, all the pursuit, all the joy of giving and receiving, all the joy of being the structure for another person's chaos, all the pursuit, everything becomes fun. It becomes joyful because we're choosing to be together, to have a dynamic experience together. This is very, very different than 100 years ago, right? This is very different goal. And our goal becomes union. Our goal becomes, what can we do to experience passion and bliss together? Oh, that would be fun. Okay, let's polarize. We don't say that, but okay, I'm going to do this. You're going to do this. Okay, here's the last thing I'm going to say. And then I promise to let you go. Because people often ask me in relationships, in intimacy, does the masculine partner always have to initiate? Right? $1 million question. Because sometimes I want to initiate. Sometimes I want it and they don't. Maybe I want to convince them. Maybe I want to be in the masculine or whatever. The answer is we can do anything we want. If you want to initiate, give her. Sometimes the challenge comes, we just have to be honest with ourselves, right? That, let's say, it's happened to me 400 billion times that I've wanted to initiate, right? Even though I really want to be in the feminine, right? But, so I'll initiate, but my piece that I have to remember, there's 2 things I want to say about this. The first thing is, if I initiate, I am now in the masculine. And I have to make sure that I'm not actually doing a bait and switch here where I'm going to initiate, but then I want you to be in the masculine because I actually want to be in the feminine. So I'm going to be in the masculine and pull you in, but then I'm going to back off and then you're going to, be in the masculine. And I have to be clear about that because they weren't showing any signs of wanting to be in the masculine, right? So I have to honor them. I have to honor this beautiful human that I get to be with, right? So that's one, and that's okay. It's okay to want to be in the masculine. That's awesome. I like it sometimes. It's really fun. But here's the deal. Every time I've ever done that, and I've initiated intimacy, it can be wonderful. You can have orgasms, it can be lovely, it can be fun, it can be all kinds of wonderful things. And when they initiate, when they actually, if a partner of mine absolutely just goes, and they initiate, it is such a different energy. Like it is completely different. It's almost like I initiate in sort of this feminine way. It's not feminine, but it's like I don't have the storehouse of powerful energy to pour into it like that. And I know the words aren't right that I'm saying, but it's different. That's all I can say is the difference between the intimacy when the masculine is going, hey, I've done this thing. I'm going to take you out for dinner. We're going to do this. We've got a whole night plan. And I've had this whole evening to just rest and like glory, like have this wonderful feeling in the feminine. And then we come home and we make love and they're totally, it's a whole different dynamic. So the answer is definitely you can initiate. Anyone can initiate. It's just a different experience. That's all. That when the masculine initiates and the feminine surrenders to that and desires it, has to be in union. It's just a whole other experience. Okay. A forest elf nymph. If we remember that energy transforms, we are in it. Yes. I think I will do another talk about this because the truth is I could talk about it. It's even so important to talk about it within us. Like when we each actually have our own strong masculine, feminine within, it's so much easier to polarize because we're comfortable in both. We're comfortable in our masculine and our feminine. So we don't have attachments and stuff. It's just easy. I find it easier to be in the masculine, in being in control. It feels safer. Even though I'm a woman, it comes from a place of not trusting and letting go. It's so true. And again, it's all within us too. Like I realized in my journey that I didn't trust my own masculine. I didn't trust that my own masculine would show up or even be kind to me, And yes, we'll have some more talks. So thank you so much for joining me today. This was wonderful. And I will go back and I'll reread all the comments and maybe make a few talks that I can really focus in on a few of these aspects because I love talking about masculine and feminine dynamics because I think in every aspect of our life, not just intimacy, it just makes things alive. It makes everything dynamic again. And I love talking about this. So thank you so much. And we have a circle called Tantra, Love and Connection with Katrina Boss. It's a circle, not a group. And I would love for you to join us there. It's a lovely, lovely group. Yeah. And thank you for everyone who donated. I appreciate that so much. I hope you have a lovely day, a lovely evening. We'll see you soon.